It's Ask Mike and Todd, Hunter Brody, Mike Gill, Todd Ranck. Here we go. So last night we had a lot of fun with episodes. What was that? 5 and 6 last night, I guess. Of that, you believed that might have been the best 2 episodes.
Well, I was blitzing you with text messages. I was calling my dad in between every little segment. I will say this: there was a lot that came out of last night that it felt like maybe the most where we're starting to get deep, right? We're starting to get a little more real into some of the scenarios, some of the thought processes. You know, it touched on the gambling. It touched on Kobe. I thought that was one of the best parts of the whole 2 episodes was when Kobe was interviewed within the last year probably, talking about him and Jordan and everybody asking them who would win if you go one-on-one, right? And his answer was, I hated that question because I don't win my 5 championships without Jordan. Jordan guided me to win my 5, and this has always been our argument, Gill, with everybody who was always saying Kobe was better than Jordan was. It's not about that.
Come on, nobody was ever saying that.
Of course. People were always trying to get Kobe to say they were basically replicas of each other. I mean, Kobe was a clone of Jordan, basically.
Right, but there weren't people who said, there weren't many anyway, that said Kobe's better than Jordan.
Well, they were putting him there if he could get to the 6th championship. I think that was the key. They were saying if he can get to that 6th, I will have an argument to argue that he's better than Jordan was. And again, it comes down to people watching Jordan. Jordan ended right as Kobe began, right?
Well, what it came down to last night is if you watched that and you had questions, you saw why Jordan was who he was, the competitiveness, the fact that he wanted to play that guy for a quarter, where he's flipping the quarter against the wall. He didn't want to play just to appease that guy. He wanted to beat that man.
Well, and even the Will Purdue, right? That piece where Will goes, we're playing for $1 blackjack in the front of the plane. And he comes up and says, guys, I want to play you. And he goes, dude, we're only playing for $1. And it wasn't about the money, right? It was about, I want to have that on you. I want to be able to tell you I beat you. And that really was his motivation throughout. I mean, I thought it was awesome, Gill. And the part where almost every motivation he had came from something that Jerry Krause might have said or done. And he used that as fuel when you talk about Tony Kukoc and the Dream Team, when you talk about Dan Marley and the Phoenix Suns finals. All of that was due to Jerry Krause going, oh, he's my boy. Tony Kukoc is my boy. Dan Marley, I love this guy. And Jordan went, oh, you love these guys, right? Okay, I'll go out there and I'm going to shut them down.
Do you give Krause any credit? Like maybe he planned that. Maybe he did that on purpose. And everybody's ripping this poor Krause, and I feel it's simply because of his appearance being so poor. Like if he was a good-looking man and, was tall, dark, and handsome, we'd probably say that guy was smart. And then because he's short and hefty, we make fun of that poor gentleman, and he doesn't deserve it.
Hold on. Now, you mentioned when we were talking about the King of Queens, you relate to that. Are you now using Jerry Krause to relate with that as well? Is that why you feel the way that you're feeling right now about this?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. But because he's been portrayed, his appearance is poor. He has poor teeth. His hat was poor. I mean, come on. You're the GM of the team. He had a poor appearance. But I think his poor appearance crafts, sadly, in the society that we live in, his poor appearance crafts. I mean, this guy, he had the foresight to go get Pippen. He had the foresight to go get Kukoc because he was a horse's ass and said stupid things that motivated his team.
Well, then so you're saying if he looked like Pat Riley, we'd be having a different conversation?
I believe that to be true.
Now, would you give any blame to the owner more so than Jerry Krause? Would you put the blame more on the owner than you would Jerry Krause?
Well, what did Krause say last night? Organization. It's the best organization. I think it's one of the best out there. So he knew where his bread was buttered. That owner knew that he had the shield because he had a guy who had a poor look.
I can't buy this look thing. At all. See, the one thing that bothers me about how Jerry Krause is being looked at is, look at that team, and look what he built. And Michael Jordan right now is a front office member, and let's be honest, he sucks as a front office member, apparently, because the Hornets haven't done anything. So for him to rip Krause the way that he's ripping, He built a team that won championships and was iconic.
And he's ripping them because he thought he had a poor look.
I cannot buy that.
Tell me, first off, I buy that more than anything. The fact that if he wasn't a short, chubby guy, that he would have had more respect. Don't you? You don't agree with that?
I don't. I mean, look. Yes, is our society very visual? Of course we are. So, am I going to say that we hear those little moments on camera when Jordan's giving Krause a little, "Oh, don't smoke the cigar; it'll stunt your growth." Yeah, is he jabbing at him? Yeah, he's jabbing at him. But the reason I think he was jabbing at him, Mike, comes down to the personality. I think if his personality was able to mesh with Jordan, I don't think Jordan would have had a problem with the way he looks, or those would have been more friendly jabs at, like, you're a good friend of mine, I'm going to stick it to you. He just simply didn't like how Kraft went about his business. And although you're right, and he put together some great teams, it was the decisions that he either didn't make or the decisions where before the second, third, or the second three-peat, he sits there and says to a team and a head coach, you aren't going to return, and it's because I don't want you to return, not because you're not doing a good enough job to return. And I think those are the pieces when you start to put together what Krause was doing throughout the time. Some of the things he was doing really rubbed that team as a whole the wrong way, even though they were successful. So, again, I won't discount.
I agree with that. You won't discount what? That because he was short and heavy, that people didn't take him serious.
And that might have been on the initial. I think I would give you credit that maybe on the initial they were like, well, who's this guy? What does he do? Once he built a championship, I think you have to give him some respect.
Yeah, first off, okay, so hold on a second, guys. So you're telling me that no GM has ever said to another guy, hey, man, you know that guy on that other team, I really like his skill set. Like, I don't see why that's a slap in the face is what I'm – like, when they kept saying that, like, oh, he thought Dan Marley was this great defensive player. Well, I mean, you're not allowed to have an opinion about another player in the league?
Well, once you get aggravated with one person for so long, everything that person does just pisses you off. But every time that person speaks, it bothers you.
Okay, well, it goes back down the line of making a comment about Dan Marley isn't preposterous. It's because they didn't respect him because of his look.
No, but here's the other piece to that, Mike and Hunter, is that when you talk about the competitive juices of Jordan, he needed something. And so it may not even, like you said, Mike, he has every right to sit there and go, man, I really like Dan Marley. He's got a really good game. But that gave Jordan, if Jordan didn't really love Krause, it gave him that extra competitive edge and motivation that he always wanted. And that was the piece to go, oh, you like this guy? I'm going to show you how good this guy is. Or, oh, you want Tony Kukoc to play for the Bulls? I'm going to show you how good he is. That's what Jordan built his career and legacy on, I think, is what it comes down to, right? Is he found reasons to get angry and to then be competitive. And you're right. I don't think Krause had any he can love Tony Kukoc all he wants. The problem the Bulls had was you got this great team, you got all these great players, and you're hung up on some guy in Croatia. And I think the way in which Jerry Krause went about it, I think, is really the issue that the Bulls –
Right. I got a tweet this morning that said, say what you want about Krause, but as far as evaluating talent, he's as good as they come. And I wrote, he was also his own worst enemy, and the person responded, true, but when it comes to talent evaluators, he's as good as it gets, essentially, because he did find these guys. He found the right role players. He knew when to get rid of, say, Charles Oakley. So I think he's just being and made out to be this villain, this character here, and he's an easy target, as you can see. I mean, he dresses poor. I mean, in the 90s, a lot of people dressed poor. By the way, Jordan, I mean, come on, he had a suit jacket on that was down to his knees. I mean, come on, you're Michael Jordan. Get that baby tailored.
No, that was the look back then, Hunter, wasn't it?
I know.
It was.
I know it was, but I'm saying, like, he could have transcended the look by getting a little quicker onto the game and shortening that baby up.
Well, and let's be honest, he was getting it tailored, Mike, at a very different place than you or I would go get a suit. He had to get it specially made for the size of who he is and the length of him and everything else. I mean, he was, I would say he had a nice, pretty strong look. Look, Krause, at the end of the day, somebody needs to come up with somebody who screwed this up, who dismantled this team. And it's always going to come back. Are you going to blame Jordan? Of course not. Are you going to blame Phil? You can blame the owner.
Hold on a second. Yeah, couldn't the owner step in and say, "You're not getting rid of Phil. I don't care what you think you're doing. You're not getting rid of it." Just to me, bonkers. That whole thing is bonkers. That they made the announcement and then stuck to it. They did the whole thing last night it was last week about before the Utah game. They played that. Hey, GM Jerry Krause reiterated that no matter what happens, Phil Jackson's not coming back. It's like, what idiot would say that ahead of the season?
Right. Well, let's also factor this in, though. Michael Jordan does not like Jerry Krause. We all know that. Michael Jordan made this documentary. We all know that. Therefore, when I watch this stuff, I always have that in the back of my mind. Now, I'm not saying what Jerry Krause did wasn't ridiculous at times, but a person who did not like Jerry Krause made the documentary. So that does need to be factored into the equation when you get to see Jerry Krause displayed.
Yeah, we got a text message. MG, you're spot on with Krause. He's a non-athletic looking dude who just needled Jordan so it compounds his villain appearance. See? I think if he was in better shape and a better looking guy. First off, forget the fact that he was short and heavy. He was not a very good looking man. That's another problem.
Well, but the other piece that it comes down to is, let's be honest, in today's NBA, with social media, a GM couldn't do what he did. If a GM put out a year prior, I'm getting rid of this great team. Like, for example, you talk about the Warriors or something. If the GM was about to say when they were on their run, guys, by the way, next year, Kevin Durant ain't coming back, Steve Kerr ain't coming back, Steph Curry ain't coming. Are you kidding me? That GM would have been out of there so fast. They couldn't have happened in today's world. So I think that plays into a part of it, too. The fact that the owner did allow him to say that ahead of that season and implement it, it does seem a little crazy to me. But, again, these owners don't always know the sport that they own. They just have a lot of money, and they own it.
Well, keep in mind, by the way, Krause was the GM of the White Sox, right? And they hired him from – he was a scout for the White Sox. I thought he was the GM of the White Sox.
No, I think he was. I could have sworn he was the GM of another sport, and that's Reinsdorf brought him over.
Hey, jackass! What sport do the White Sox play?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. But you just said you don't think he was the GM.
No, well, Josh is telling me he wasn't the GM; he was the scout. But I thought he was the GM of the White Sox.
I think, that's at least that's what I thought I heard too.
Yeah, I thought he was. It says here he had a position as a scout or GM for the Baltimore Bullets, Chicago. So first off, he was a scout or in the NBA. Then he went to baseball, and then he went back to basketball.
So, and again, his resume was strong. It's just, again, I'm talking about the owner not knowing the sport. Sometimes these owners buy these teams because they got a lot of money, and they leave it to the GM to do the business because they don't really know what they're doing. I don't know if that's Jerry Reinsdorf or not, but he left a lot of power to Jerry Krause. Should he have done that? A lot of people question.
By the way, all right, he was the GM for the World Series championship White Sox. So he built the World Series White Sox, a team that has zero history. He wins a World Series with them after he had won 6 championships with the Bulls. I mean, that's pretty unbelievable.
Wait a minute. He went to the White Sox after the Bulls?
He was a scout with the White Sox in '84 when Reinsdorf bought the Bulls. And then, all right, so it says Krause worked as a baseball scout in the 70s in the Indians, A's, Mariners, White Sox. While working with the Mariners, he scouted part-time for the Lakers. As a White Sox scout, he played a role in signing Ozzie Guillen and Kenny Williams, who would lead the White Sox to a World Series championship in 2005. Oh, okay. No, he was not the GM of that team. He was the scout who helped sign Guillen to be the manager, and then they found Williams to be the GM.
Right. They subsequently went on to win the championship, but he wasn't that.
Correct. He was a scout with that team. It's pretty unbelievable still that he was a scout in baseball and basketball, back and forth. Suns, Sixers, Lakers, Bulls, White Sox, boom. A's, Indians. I mean, that's a pretty crazy life.
Now, imagine how many more jobs that he would have gotten if he was a good-looking man.
Right. I don't know that that look didn't seem to hurt his career too much.
Well, that's because all the good-looking people who kept hiring him used him as a shield. All right, we'll end on that note. Today's Ask Mike and Todd, Sports Bash Live 97. That one went by really fast. All right, we'll do it again tomorrow. I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, guys, have a good one.